Welcome, everyone. My name is Ed Lazarus. My name is Ed Lazarus. And I'm president of the Branford Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber represents 24 towns, 4 states, and over 5,000 employees. Tonight, we are more than happy and we are pleased to be able to present the debate for the position of first select person for Branford. The program tonight would not be possible without the support and the generosity of AT&T. They're not only supporters, great supporters of the Branford Chamber, but they're supporters of chambers and the entire shoreline community. It gives me great pleasure to welcome and introduce you to Kelly Wade Bertucci from AT&T.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening. My name is Kelly Wade Bertucci, and I'm a Director of External and Legislative Affairs for AT&T Connecticut. I would like to thank everyone for being here this evening, especially Ed Lazarus and the Branford Chamber of Commerce for hosting this evening's event, and Chris Velarde of WTNH for agreeing to moderate. I would also like to give a special thanks to our candidates for not only participating in tonight's debate, but for their many years of public service and commitment to the Branford community. AT&T shares that commitment to community. In fact, between 2008 and 2011, AT&T and our over 5,000 Connecticut employees have contributed more than $6.1 million to local communities. Sponsoring tonight's debate is an example of that and one of the many reasons why I personally am proud to be an AT&T employee. The decisions that we as voters make in the upcoming election will impact, among other things, our lives, our local economy, the education of our children, and the ability to create jobs for years to come. I appreciate the candidates sharing their vision for Branford and encourage everyone to be sure to come out and vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Obviously, we're having a few technical difficulties, so give us a second just to make sure that we have these all in place, which I believe are now corrected. So, while we're waiting for the correction, felt like I had antennae there for a second. Okay, I apologize for that and thank you for your patience. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator for tonight, truly a person who does not need any introduction, Chris Velarde from WTNH News. I'd like to introduce Chris and hand it over to him for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Ed. Good evening to all of you. Thank you for coming, and good evening also to the audience on BCTV. This is being broadcast live tonight on cable access. It will, as things tend to be on BCTV and cable access, be rebroadcast, so you will get a chance to see it again, and those who maybe didn't get a chance to see it tonight, you can tell them we'll get a chance to see it as well. Let me go over the format for the debate first and foremost. We're going to be separating the debate into 4 or 5 segments, depending on time. Each segment will begin with a question about a topic, obviously, of interest to people here in Branford. The candidate who will answer the question first, it will be directed to one candidate, will have 2 minutes to provide an answer. The other 2 candidates will then get 90 seconds to rebut that answer, and then the original answeree, I suppose, will get another 90 seconds to respond to any of those comments. At that point, the discussion will begin. And by discussion, I mean perhaps the candidates will be questioning one another. I will interject questions as well to try to get them to clarify certain points. It doesn't mean discussion from the audience. And that is one thing I'd like to make clear, that although there is a large and supportive audience and we appreciate your presence here tonight, we do ask that you hold your applause, we hold your cheers and jeers until the very end of the evening when all is said and done. If you are watching at home, you can applaud and cheer all you'd like. That's completely fine. We won't stop you from doing that. Just keep it down if the neighbors complain. At the end of the evening, once we finish the 4 or 5 questions, again, depending on time, there will be final speeches. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their final speeches. And the order of the questions and the order of where the candidates are standing and the order of the closing remarks, all determined before this began. Very highly scientific. We put paper into a fire hat and they picked the numbers out. So you can trust that it was done. All 3 of them were there. They picked their own numbers. So I mentioned that we don't want to hear cheering and jeering, except for now, because we are going to bring the 3 candidates, Selectman Andy Campbell, Selectman Jamie Cosgrove, and Jacey Wyatt, to the podium. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And we anticipate a very interesting and informative debate. A lot to talk about, obviously a lot of issues facing the voters in the town of Branford. The first question, the person who drew number 1 in our scientific way of going about this, is standing at podium number 1, Andy Campbell. First question is to you. And the question really is a simple question. Is Branford business friendly?
Oh, certainly I believe that Branford is business friendly. I'll tell you that I've heard it out there that in the past that Branford has had a reputation for being less than friendly. Quite frankly, I think that most of that is historical and not actual in the present day and age. The Planning and Zoning Commission in the last couple of years has redone its zoning regulations, and I think that it's made it far more operational for developers and business and homeowners. As well, I think that the town's newer system of getting permits online, tracking permits online, being much more accessible to the public or whoever the consumers are of the building and planning and zoning departments. I think that's, well, I know because I've heard from folks that's a significant enhancement even in the last few years. And given the balance that we have between maintaining our natural resources, our protected lands, our wetlands and salt marshes versus the need to develop property appropriately, I think that we've struck the right balance. Can we do more? Certainly we can do more. I've heard issues just about where people are located in various offices around town, and it'd be nice to put all these people in one big building or one big room with cubicles, but that's not the reality. And so I think there are enhancements, but I think the town's come a long way, especially in the last several years.
Andy, thank you. We'll go in the order of the questions, so Jamie will give the first 90 seconds to you.
Oh, all right. Well, I would say we're not business friendly enough. We have a lot to improve on. We do have a reputation of putting up roadblocks when businesses want to come to Branford and develop their business here. We need to begin to change that reputation. I feel I am the person that can do that. We need to treat all businesses fairly, honestly, and we have to be clear in our position. So I think there's a lot to improve on. One instance, I hear a lot of complaints about the permitting and inspection process. That needs to be streamlined. We've done it for Dorada. Why aren't we doing it for the small business owner? Even I'll go a little bit further. Why aren't we doing it for the homeowner that wants to put a small addition on their house? So there's a lot to improve on.
90 seconds for you, Jacey.
Thank you. There's an illusion that business in Branford, that it's friendly. I actually opened a business here in 1995. I actually 4 stores along the way here in East Haven and Branford. But it's an illusion. There actually is not the truth. It actually is not very business friendly in Branford. You don't see major corporations moving into town without assistance of a $2.5 million to get Dorada to move to New Jersey to get here. That is, to me, what are we, first of all, thinking about it? Because we want to attract all types of businesses, small business, large business. As I just said, I opened a business here in town. I had to move from building to building because of situations from the building department or situations that made my business not be able to grow. I had to be more creative to find to go online than trying to open a main street and being inside this town in a brick and mortar store. So we do have to look upon opening the red carpet wagon and say, welcome to Branford. Business is welcome. I, as your first selectman, would absolutely want to be the first person to make the meetings, encourage developers from all over the country to come and see Branford. Bring them here, help us with our demographics, and make sure those businesses that we are not attracting find us to be their golden ticket.
All right, Andy. They both say roadblocks, no. You say yes. You have 90 seconds to respond to them.
I've had several meetings in the last month or two with developers who are seeking to invest in Branford, and significant investments. And while they have cited the usual sort of discussions about, why doesn't planning and zoning meet more frequently, and various issues like that, nevertheless, they are seeking to invest in Branford. I'll also point out I've met recently with members and the leadership of a church that had been displaced here in town, and with only minimal assistance, and they came to me as a selectman and asked, well, where do we go and what do we do? And with only minimal guidance, folks who are not lawyers and not developers or anything, but just folks from a church have I think, been able to successfully navigate the building and permitting process. And so I think that it is navigable. I think that the process is understandable even to laypersons. And as a small business owner for the last 17 years, I haven't actually run into that many issues. And as an attorney who does land use matters, I haven't found our regulations to be difficult or onerous. And so, as I said, I think there are enhancements to be had, but I think the facts actually bear out that we're quite receptive to business.
We're talking a lot about the process. You've all mentioned process here. What about the desire? Is there a desire for businesses? Do they want to be here? And Jamie, I'll start with you, and I'll...
Definitely. I mean, Costco wants to come to Branford. And we talked about the zoning process, and there are, the purpose of the zoning board is to, and the zoning regulations is to ensure that it's appropriate development for a site that's chosen. But we've heard in the past that roadblocks have been put up to stop. When we're talking about business friendly, I'm thinking about significant businesses that want to come to Branford too. That'll add to the tax revenues coming in. It's important that we welcome them here.
Is it possible to change the process, Jacey?
Absolutely. I think that takes right from their leadership. Coming right here at Town Hall, we would need to work with our, which neither of them just said, our Economic Development Commission. I've been going to every one of their meetings for the last year. I'm the one that suggested and raised my hand to see if Amazon.com would actually come to Branford. I'm the one that mentioned Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Stu Leonard's. They didn't even know even who I was talking about. I have a list of about 18 businesses that moved to Branford in 8 months, and that's economic development for Branford. So
Andy-
yes, it can be changed from leadership.
And do you think it needs to change the process to get rid of some of the roadblocks that these two are talking about?
I think that there are tweaks. I think that but I don't see them as roadblocks. That implies a rather large obstacle. I have represented businesses who have wanted to come into Branford. It has to be the right location. And the truth of the matter is we're substantially built out. We don't have that many parcels that are immediately developable. And so much of the development going forward is going to be redevelopment of previously developed parcels. And that poses different challenges to developers. I'd point out that our grand list grew this last year more than most of our neighboring communities. And so the grand list is growing, and it's growing on the commercial side. And so can we do better? Certainly we can do better. But I don't see the obstacles as being roadblocks as much as I see them being smaller hurdle-sized obstacles.
And you mentioned something in your first answer about balancing economic development, preserving open space. And if you have lived in Branford and grown up in Branford, you hear it all the time. Well, we don't want to be fill in the name of the town. Jamie, how do you make that balance? Growing the grand list, bringing in business, preserving open space?
We've done a tremendous job preserving open space. I think nobody in this room will deny that. The zoning regs are such that we will not be one of those other towns fill in the blanks. All right, we have a pretty strict zoning regulations in Branford. But I just want to go back to one thing real quick. Andy, I'll take you for a ride tomorrow. I'll show you plenty of parcels of land that are ripe for
I'll
development.
come with you.
Oh, I'm not saying we don't have them. I'm just saying that.
And we're not built out.
No.
And it's important to have new development, not replacing businesses that have left town. That's not growing the grand list. That's just filling in what you have lost. It's important to grow the grand. So the tax, because we all know that the tax burden's growing, and we need to offset that by bringing in new revenue streams, which is done by bringing in new development.
Jacey, same question about balancing.
Actually, I have a list that was provided to us at one of our meetings. There's 4 towns, actually 5 now: Cheshire, Manchester, Wallingford, Windsor, New Haven, and Bloomfield. Actually, a few more. Their grand list grew too. So we are not the only ones. There's plenty of other towns taking a lot more business. And one other thing I was saying is amazing to think that there's not land available. I'm on Parks and Open Space. I've been appointed one of your commissioners. I am enjoying and loving that we have one of the largest parks in town of Branford Supply Ponds, keeping it open space and preserved. An architect, like where I come from in my background, understands how to make development in Branford in preserving our past. I was one of the first person that put a TV show out there on Branford Village, how we can preserve our past and create a tourism and economic development town by preserving our town. And economic development is not going to destroy our land when you let landscape plans, architecture plans, people who have been in this field, who are building these all the time, come and approach and build something in Branford that we actually like. So, yes.
And Andy, if there's anything you'd like to add that you haven't talked about with that same question.
Well, I don't actually disagree with Mr. Cosgrove about there are developable parcels. They're just not the right fit for every business. But of note, right now, Branford has an opportunity to jumpstart development and some economic development with the completion of the railroad bridge at exit 53, which is going to be completed this month, some 6 or 7 months ahead of schedule. And I have spoken with state officials in the Department of Transportation and our state legislative delegation about really getting going on that development, because I think everybody in town recognizes that corridor along exit 53 is appropriate for development, and it's ripe for development right now. And in fact, the outstanding permits that have been there for several years, that have been on hold while the State Department of Transportation has completed the pretzel reconfiguration as well as the bridge project, those permits are going to expire someday. So I think that we need to get a jump on commercial development and expand the grand list in the appropriate places, and I think Exit 53 is the first place to do that.
Exit 53?
Yeah, I put it out there a few weeks ago. I stated my position. I'd like to see Exit 53 redeveloped as well as 56, where Costco showed interest in. But I just add that I don't believe that 53 is right for development right now. There's a lot of other issues that have to be addressed before that. That with the state exit and on-ramp, that needs to be addressed. So you're talking about development that would be several years down the road. We have needs now that need to be addressed, needs now that need to be paid for, and that's what I favor 56 for the Costco location. That is the start.
And you've got a 53 plan as well.
Absolutely. It's in the book. 10 years of planning has also worked with developers out west, how we can actually bring a hospital, actual shopping centers, outlet centers that fit in those properties. But one person people you didn't mention is that Stop and Shop has a land lease up there for 5 years more. They finally released it at 56. So 53 is potentially coming. But you're also looking for the state to help us build these projects, get investors to build these projects. 4 owners that are up in that property don't really get along. Well, we need to work with them to get them along, to get those properties available so developers could come into 53, 54, 55, 56 and build us what we need. That preserves the town and gets us the jobs in the blue, all the jobs that we need here in town.
We'll leave the economic development discussion there. I have a feeling it'll probably come up throughout the evening in other places as well. That's the thing about these topics, is they all kind of intertwine together. Let's move on to question number 2. And question number 2, by our order before, is for Jamie Cosgrove. And the question is about the growing senior population in Branford. This is certainly another issue that has been discussed many times in this town. There is a need for a new, more accessible senior center. How would you help the seniors in town? What would be your priority list in terms of helping seniors?
Well, there absolutely is a need, and it's a shame that it's been their need for a new senior center, and it's a shame that it's been stalled for 12 years. The first thing we need to do is create a new process, and that's why I proposed a public building commission, which would move along this process rather than it getting tied up in the political play that goes on in town. Secondly, everybody asks, well, how are we going to pay for this? And again, going back to the economic development, that's why I propose supporting Costco at 56, an area that is ready to be developed, an area that will bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars of new tax revenues, so we can build the seniors that center that they deserve.
Jacey, 90 seconds.
Our seniors should be our priority right now. We need a senior center and they need housing. They have a 3-year waiting list at Rosenthal Gardens here in Branford. There's 7,500 seniors in Branford. My mother is a senior citizen. And nowadays, it's becoming like, who needs the first building? Why can't we look upon many buildings being built at the same time? It's not that hard. It's just utilizing talents and multitasking and getting these done. Our seniors were one of the first things that I mentioned when I came here back in March to the Board of Selectmen and presented my golf course plan for the Tabor, which showed a senior center, a country club, and bringing not just the youth and the seniors to be able to learn wellness, learn golf, encourage their life, bringing in the housing that will allow them to enjoy that area and other areas. But it just doesn't have to be one location. Listen, they want a building and they want to be maybe in downtown. So utilize. Maybe we need to bring in a development that comes to downtown that allows us to be able to bring that shelter inside. It's available to us. open up your mind and use your imagination as leaders, we can be able to work with everybody in town and get the seniors the building they need.
And Andy, addressing the needs of seniors.
Chris, as I've been walking around town recently and hearing from folks, especially senior citizens, I'll tell you that the needs seem to be not only just a replacement for the current senior center, but also tax relief for senior citizens seems to be a looming issue, a growing concern for many of these citizens. Transportation remains an issue for many of these citizens because and quite frankly, that goes back to your economic development that we'll get back to. And yes, I agree that housing, elderly housing or affordable housing it remains an issue and is likely to increase as an issue. With regard to the senior center, I have long advocated that both politically but also professionally as a conservator for senior citizens, it's been functionally obsolete for a long time. It's inaccessible to many of the citizens that it's intended to serve, and replacing that properly and sooner rather than later, I think, should be the first priority of a standing building commission. As well, I spoke briefly on elderly tax relief, and this is a program, twice I've chaired the Elderly Tax Relief Committee in the last 10 years, and neither time did the program really go as far as it was intended. But my concern is that somehow people will get forced out of their homes living on fixed incomes. And so I intend to take a fresh look and appoint a committee to re-examine the issue of elderly tax relief.
And I want to get back to elderly tax relief in a second within this discussion. Jamie, I want to give you your 90 seconds to rebut what they both said. It does sound like everyone is agreeing that there is a need for a new senior center, at least to start.
Well, I believe, yeah, we're all recognize that there's a need for a new senior center, but I believe I'm the only one that's outlined a process on forming the building commission and fully supporting, recognizing. Jacey brought up that we can do a number of projects at the same time. It's not hard. Well, it's not hard, but you need two things. You need to have a process that works, and you need to have money coming in to pay for it. I mean, the seniors don't want a new senior center and then be taxed heavily to pay for it.
Let's take that building commission that you mentioned. Let's start with that. You talk about depoliticizing the process. How would you do that? How would you form this commission, and how would you task them to move forward?
Well, the way it is right now, we put a, well, the commission would be bipartisan. It would be, they would oversee all public building projects. And so there's not that, and then they would have, say, you had 9 members on there, and you would add 2 members, temporary members, who would oversee, be part of the committee for a specific project. So, for instance, if we're building a new senior center, you would have your standing building committee, and then you would add 2 members who represent the senior community, so their interests are represented. It takes away, because now that this commission oversees all public building commissions, there's not that, they're not being manipulated behind closed doors. It's not a committee, it's a standalone commission with some independence, some real authority, rather than being a committee that far too often is manipulated.
Andy, your thoughts on this type of group? You mentioned kind of a group as well to talk about building projects.
Well, in fact, this is the model that they use up in North Branford as their standing building authority. And as Jamie has said, and as I too have spoken of, and in fact as endorsed by the Board of Finance about a month and a half ago, this should depoliticize the process. It should have the effect of prioritizing the town needs, which is really critical given the lack of support for individual building committees in the past. And this North Branford model was actually mentioned to me and way back in, I think, January of this year by Kurt Treiber, the former chair of the Public Works Building Committee. And I've studied it, and it is a successful model, at least for North Branford, especially with the inclusion of a few extra folks who would be specific to each of the building projects.
You both talk about depoliticizing, and I think there are probably skeptics who say everything's political. Jacey, can this type of committee work? Do you have a different idea?
I'm the most unpolitical person in the group. I don't have a party to answer to. And one thing I want to just first say on to that is, obviously, I know how to start the committee too, but you guys have been here for the last 2 years. Why haven't you? Why haven't you, if you knew that was the right way to do it? Why would you not start it and get it going? It seems like now that we're ready for this next level, we can do it. We just dismissed our building committee for the public works, which I know me and him agree that we should have kept continuing it. But right now, it needs to be not just the standing committee. We need an architectural review board. We need to look at other towns around us that are doing these projects. Guilford, they have also reviewed those projects, and they have those committees set up, and they are doing it correctly. I think that bringing the nonpartisan, absolutely, but this should have been done 2 years ago, and the next leader will take it on to the next level and make it happen.
Well, no,
Go ahead.
I agree it should have been done, and it is something I have spoken about to many people in town. But why hasn't it been done? That's what happens when you have a administration that it doesn't listen. It doesn't matter party lines. If there's a good idea, it's a good idea. And that's what needs to change in Branford. So.
Absolutely.
All right, let's touch on the tax issue, because, Andy, you brought that up, tax relief. You mentioned that there have been efforts to provide some tax relief. You've been involved in those. What needs to happen? How would you prioritize tax relief for seniors?
Well, the best way to provide tax relief to seniors and everybody else in town is to expand our grant list. And
It all comes back to the economic development.
Well, it does. And in the last few years, the pendulum has swung because of the economic downturn. The pendulum has swung from the commercial tax base back over to the residential. And it's almost imperceptible, but it does lead to a heavier burden. And without state educational funding, we do pay for more of our initiatives here in town. So elderly tax relief could work. It should be expanded. It will work. It does work. We have both a tax deferral program as well as a tax credit. But quite frankly, we're nowhere near the spending cap for these. And my concern is that between gradual incremental increases in property taxes, as well as increases in flood insurance premiums, that the pressure will be on folks with fixed income to stay in their homes. So I would propose that a tax relief commission, and it's dictated by statute, and they could be formed prior to the end of the calendar year. And in fact, we could have reports back and examined by the Board of Finance and the RTM before budget season, which could provide tax relief to folks as soon as next July 1st.
Jamie?
I would just have to ask, then who is going to pay for the taxes? Who are you going to increase taxes on? The tax incentives, it's true that the best thing is to help lower the taxes on all people in Branford, all citizens and small businesses. The pendulum has swung. It has swung on, not because of the economic downturn, because of the roadblocks putting up preventing development. The revaluations that we've had keep putting increasing the residential homeowners taxes, and we're not bringing in any new business or new development to help offset that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to another topic which, again, ties into all of this, particularly with taxes, and that is education. Now, as a first selectman, you have a board of education which is in charge of education in town. But obviously, as first selectman, there's a role. This question is to Jacey first. What would you see the role of the first selectman being when it comes to addressing education?
Education. Perfect. As I recall, I got signatures to put me on the Board of Education this year on your ballot, because our town charter, a first selectman cannot sit on the Board of Education. Somebody that we give 50% of our town budget to, and we don't have anything that we can say about it. And I feel that is absolutely one of the reasons I made sure I put mine on the ballot. So if we do get that spot, we're going to make sure we get into this charter and have an addendum. Education. As first selectwoman, we have children in Branford who don't have enough food right now. They're not properly fed. We should be able to create a lot more for just the seniors, a child, 33-year-old, a businesswoman. All of this comes together in a big circle. But on education, as a first selectman, we should make sure we have great teachers, great schools, and a great town that these people can't wait to move here, to live here, and educate their children here. I was one of the first advocates to suggesting bringing Branford University, creating a college area for us here in town. That instead of these kids leaving the town as soon as they leave, we encourage them to stay here, learn here, grow a family here, grow a house here, build here, grow a business here. Education all comes around the same circle. I've been educated from the Branford High School system, went to school and got 3 degrees. Education brings us to where we want to go, and look where I am today. Thank you.
Andy?
Education is one of the great, the principal byproducts of a town. It ought to be prioritized, and it directly impacts home values and the local economy and a town's estimation, especially relative to other towns. As a first selectman, I think that as a second selectman, I've worked very closely with the superintendent of schools on many initiatives designed to feed our kids and to provide proper health care for them. As a first selectman, there are many things that the board of that the first selectman can do working with the Board of Education and the superintendent. I have proposed that right off the bat, if elected, I would work with the superintendent of schools to form a school readiness council. This town should be investing more in early childhood education. Studies have shown for decades that that's where the investment in education pays off the greatest. And in fact, there are grant monies available through the state Department of Education to do just this. And so I've worked with the superintendent of schools to propose that, and we would form a school readiness council and get these funds online for the next fiscal year. As well, I think the town has been coordinating resources and coordinating assets with the Board of Education recently. We're now using the same, the same software and data tracking systems. And finally, I would say that this town should be have greater capacity for grant writing, and many opportunities exist for the town side and the Board of Education side to work together to get external funds in to support education.
All right, Jamie, First Selectman's role in education in town.
Well, the education budget, which is 60% of our town budget, is the first selectman needs to take a more proactive role in the discussion. Education is an investment in our children. It's an investment for our workforce that we create. It's an investment in our town. So I know often that the first selectman or the town will hide behind that. The Board of Education has autonomy over how their dollar is spent. But as a leader, you can lead the discussion to make sure that those dollars aren't being wasted, frivolously spent. And they're put into the classroom rather than outside of the classroom where they don't belong. So I think that's where I would stand on it. But the most important thing is, I just want to stress to everyone to really take a look at who you're electing for the Board of Education. That's where it all starts. Not enough focus on the candidates. So please, my team, we have 2 strong candidates running this year. So
it's hard not to talk about schools, physical structures of schools, when you're talking about education in the town of Branford. There's discussions about Walsh. There's discussions about Sliney. There's discussions about some of the buildings that were schools. Let's take a look at those things. As first selectman, I'll start with you, Andy. How would you approach perhaps the need or perhaps studying the need to deal with those buildings?
Well, I think that this would fall under the jurisdiction of a standing building commission. And the Board of Finance does agree with that in a letter dated, I think, September 10th or so, in which they asked the Board of Education to hold off on their building requests for the time being because we have to prioritize on a town-wide perspective. That being said, I think the town's footprint of its infrastructure is too large at this point, and we need to get to these decisions. If we're able to properly prioritize our building needs, we can, and especially take a look at the debt service load. What's the cost going to be for paying for these structures over the long term, and how will that impact our mill rate and our property taxes? Then we can all build a consensus towards what our priorities should be. The schools are scheduled to be replaced. We're still paying off, we're almost done paying off the bonds for the Branford High School that was completed a little more than a decade ago. And when those get rolled over and rolled up, quite frankly, and paid off, then we'll have additional borrowing capacity. There's not really a question about the town's ability to borrow. We have a AAA bond rating. We can borrow money at roughly 0.2% interest. But it's having everybody in town comfortable with the priorities that we express as a community and identify as a community. And as I said, our footprint's too large at this point, but I think there are ways to dispose of assets and reuse some of the town-owned buildings that are currently being used by the Board of Education.
These are things, again, that if everyone who has been in Branford has heard these discussions come up, as you mentioned. Jamie, what about your thoughts in terms of prioritizing and where the schools come when it comes to prioritizing?
We need a new middle school. We've been talking about this for 15 years now. Our students deserve to have a facility that's functional and safe. We need, the Standing Building Committee is the first step, or commission is the first step ensuring that the process is completed. The second step is to make sure we have funds to pay for this school, and that goes back to the economic development. So that's
I'll tell you as
My turn.
and I'll let you talk. Don't worry, Jacey. This is the difficult thing about this kind of format is each of these answers, they all tie together. Each one of these comes back to another thing. But Jacey, in terms of the schools, the prioritizing, your thoughts?
Absolutely. As I was just saying before, a multitasker, all of them can be working at the same time. We keep worrying about the standing committee is going to be building our town. The first selectwoman should be designing and working with people to build the town and show things where things can go. I went to the Board of Rec and showed them how we can use 40 acres behind Veterans Park to build the intermediate school. I went to the Board of Ed to present this idea. They didn't want to hear it. Okay? I asked another situation, my priorities. This is now at Board of Finance of what they want to do with the next 3 schools of Sliney, Intermediate, building Branford Hills. Why don't we have 3 proposals of what we want to do in Branford and let the people tell us what? Not just the Board of Ed getting a consultant to tell us what they think. I want 3 consultants to present to this town what we can do with our schools. I'm from a design background. I spent a year making sure I could show you some great ideas of how to make schools work, how to make these happen. But how are they going to make it happen? Tax the citizens? No. Invest in our town. Let the citizens invest in our town. Investors build in our town. We get the money first. Then we build these lovely projects. It's not that hard on priorities.
It's not that hard on priorities, but actually doing it may be the difficult thing, and I see you guys responding. You want to respond to that idea?
To which of her ideas specifically?
To the idea of multiple golf course. Let me be a little more. I'll be more specific with my question. To the idea of getting multiple design ideas. Let the people decide.
Of course.
Well, certainly the input is necessary. I mean, we can't build a senior center without a needs assessment by seniors to tell town leadership what they need to do. And I focus on the seniors because I don't agree with Mr. Cosgrove that we need a middle school right now. I don't think that's anywhere near the highest priority. We have a functional middle school today. My kids go there, and I've got a few more that will be going there in a few years. But the senior center did not work today for most of the senior citizens in town. And so there is certainly need for input and multiple options, which will all be reviewed by a building committee with credibility in a nonpartisan way, and that's all good and well. But at some point, there's a leadership prerogative that we have to make the decisions. And the issue of, for example, a new middle school, that would have an impact of a couple mills on our taxes. And I don't think that there's a political will or anywhere near a consensus among the taxpayers in town that we want to invest in that much of our tax bill right now in that project at probably the exclusion of a senior center and a public works garage, which are also pressing priorities.
Jamie, can it all be done?
Yes, I just want
Of
to. I will agree with Jacey that, yeah, we're not going to have a single consultant give us a single plan and we're going to fund that. That's the problem. That's where the building commission comes in. We're not going to build a new middle or renovate a middle school at this astronomical price of $120 million, only to receive 11 cents on the dollar back from the state. That is the wrong way to go for it. That's the wrong way to approach this. And then what happens is other needs are left behind. And I'm not here prioritizing the school over the seniors' needs or public works needs, and nor do I think Attorney Campbell's qualified to prioritize them either.
That's the commission that you both have spoken of. All right, let's move on to another topic which has been a big one in this town. Over the last decade, the use of attorneys by the town have been called into question in different ways. We'll go back to Andy for question 1. This is question 4. Would you keep the current town attorneys? If not, what would you be looking for in an attorney as you move forward?
No.
As an attorney in the daytime, sometimes when I get to it, I have thought on this. Specifically, the current attorneys, no, I don't think that I would retain the current town attorneys. Nor would I necessarily keep the model that's currently being used under the current administration because, quite frankly, I see that we're in a different time than we have been over the last decade. And we've engaged litigation counsel for a good chunk of the last decade, and that's not necessarily appropriate for where I envision that the town will be moving forward. I'll say that as a practicing attorney and having been town counsel several years ago for tax matters, I do understand the process by which they are, the town engages its attorneys. But and not even speaking personally in any defense, but the attorneys are necessary. They are the defense of the town. The town is being sued 100 times, 200 times a year, and these are required services that the town needs. However, a lot of this stuff is pretty pro forma, and so I think that I think that we can achieve a lower legal budget going forward. I think that it will be a slightly different model going back a decade or two to an older town council model that's been utilized in the past, wherein town council will be much more engaged in town hall, assisting the departments in their daily routines, and I think that the town can prosper by this going forward.
Jamie, how would you address the town attorney?
The lawyers are the defense of the town, but the problem is when they become a weapon for the town. I don't believe this first selectman should have the sole discretion whether or not we enter into a lawsuit and sue an individual So that would be my first, and I've supported it when I served on Rules and Ordinance. We looked into it, creating basically a process or oversight process before we engage in lawsuits.
Jacey?
As I think everyone saw my reaction, I want to start fresh. I want to make it new, and I want to look upon bringing in a new legal team here in Branford for me if I won for Selectwoman. We already have so many pending lawsuits against the town right now that one of us is gonna be inheriting. And it's one of the things now that we need to be negotiators. We have to work with the clients and the lawyers to be able to get to a solution that these will not be as expensive lawsuits, from legal fees to liabilities back to the citizens of Branford. And if we operate a lot smoother in this town, hopefully these lawsuits won't keep throwing our circle and, like us, be part of the fire line when we can solve these issues if we all negotiate and work together before we come into these legal situations.
Andy, you have 90 seconds to respond to anything you've heard.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome.
You're welcome.
I do agree with Jamie that, in fact, and the town code actually speaks clearly on this, and as well as state statute, that the first selectman does not either initiate nor resolve lawsuits on their own. And in fact, I don't know that that's necessarily happened, at least not in the instance that I think he's referencing. As I said before, I am optimistic about where we can go with this because, last year the town's legal budget actually came in under budget, but and we have statutorily derived fees. We have to pay lawyers to defend when we have a revaluation that the state statutes say we have to have. And folks will argue their property assessments with the town. And so there are a certain number there's a certain extent of the legal fees that come with the territory. However, I think in the past we've engaged out of town counsel, and I'm much more in favor of engaging local counsel to help local businesses. And also I think that, as I said before, we'll engage less litigation counsel and more hands-on and user-friendly for the departments in town.
I'm going to leave that there for a second. Unless you have something? Go ahead.
I think we're all aware that we have initiated a lawsuit without any other approval from any other body. So to deny that or try to spin that is against everything that's been proven.
And with our reval next year, that means that we're going to have a lot more lawsuits. So we better be legally prepared for all this new reval.
Jamie, is there anything in particular you would look for in bringing town council in?
Well, I would, with selecting a new town council, obviously I would want somebody who's competent. I would review their record and
counsel.
So there would be an evaluation process that I would go for.
I'm going to go to a topic that has gotten a lot of play, and that one word would be Tabor. Obviously now, all three of you are in agreement. That is not the place for public works. Andy, you have come to that conclusion. Jamie, Jacey, you were at that conclusion. Jamie, this would be your question first. What do you do with Tabor? And I guess 1A of that question is, what do you do about public works? And I imagine this is going to go back to the building commission that you've talked about already.
Well, with Tabor, I've always, and maybe the others have come to the conclusion it's not the spot, but my position has always been I opposed for public works, and my vote backs that up. I've always said when they first initially came and they said they want to carve out 10 acres of it, and when I was looking at the plan, I said, this doesn't make sense. We have 77 acres down there. That's no way to develop a piece of property. Carving out a parcel, with a large parcel like that, you formulate a master plan, and you assess the cost to develop that master plan, and the impact on that property and the abutting properties. So that would be my, how we would handle Tabor. Do you want to go to Public Works, or you want to let them handle?
Let's go to Tabor. For Jacey, I've seen the pictures.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I was the first person to come to the Board of Selectmen, and it was November 2012. And I suggested 10 different options of where Public Works could go. November 2012. I'm the one that showed you that it could fit at the transfer station and save the town between possibly $5 to $20 million. It fits. It works. Doesn't have to be the only plan. The suggestion was Tabor, 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 Tabor has to go there. There was no other option. I'm the first one that raised my hand to come to that meeting and make sure I showed you a presentation. Then invited back in March to show you what I would do with my idea of Tabor, how this can be a golf course, a country club, a senior center. The Danny Animal Cosgrove Animal Shelter would be built on the location where Public Works can go. How this can actually be the backbone to that neighborhood that they liked. I heard thousands and thousands of people from the New York Times did an article on me because of this. And I believe that land should just not be the scar of the neighborhood when it can be possibly create a brand new neighborhood and create whatever we need to make that neighborhood be satisfied that Public Works is not coming anywhere near Tabor Drive.
I think that is definitely something that all three of you are in agreement with. Andy, let's start with the Tabor property. Your thoughts on what should happen now that Public Works is off the table?
A committee of citizens should determine the long-term use for this property. And in the last month or so, I've been walking around the affected neighborhoods immediately adjacent to the property and signing folks up, quite frankly, who would be interested in sharing their opinions toward the long-term use of this property. I think that it's best suited for passive recreation, but there are issues still. And so I'll tell you that before we get to the long-term vision of the property, we need to do a few things in the short term. The first thing we need to do is clean it up. Mm-hmm. There are incinerators and tires and cars and culverts, and there's about 10 acres of asphalt chunks out there. They're dirt piles, and it's always been my intention to get rid of the eyesores and start covering them up. There are some practical frustrations with this property, of course, because there's just not any dirt on the property. And so we have to have a long-term plan towards regenerating this property after we clean it up. But I do view that it can be very productive. It was always my intention to have the Shoreline Greenway Trail cut along the north edge of it and along Chet's Pond there. But that would only be a valuable trail if we clean up all the junk that's around there that was left there from previous property owners.
While you're on, just give me a few seconds now then on Public Works. Where should we look to put our Public Works garage?
It's been my position for a while that it's been my hope for a while that the North Ivy Street property would be viable. And in fact, the reports that we received at the beginning of September didn't reject that notion, but it actually stands as operationally superior to the Tabor property in many regards. And so if I had my druthers, and it's not my opinion, or it's not my say-so anyway, but if I had my druthers, it would be located at North Ivy Street. There would be some operational changes to the model that's been presented previously, about 35,000 square foot building and everything located right there, because in fact the parcel on North Ivy wouldn't sustain that. I have examined all the other properties around town that have even been rumored to be available for this, and many of them aren't that much better in terms of residential impact than Tabor was, and many of them have environmental issues or flooding issues. But if I had to pick a spot, I'd say North Ivy Street.
Jamie, you have not had a chance to address this particular part of the question yet.
Well, to be correct, that Tabor, according to the administration and Andy's vote, is not off the table. They never officially took it off the table. And you stand here and say you want to, your intention is to clean up that site and has always been that. Well, what you're talking about, the debris that's piled there, the fill and the asphalt, that is from Public Works, and that operation was going to continue after Public Works was down there. Listen, there's a number of viable locations for Public Works in town. I've always stated since, for the last couple of years, let's continue the process and evaluate these, reevaluate them, the ones that we looked at, and there's potentially some others. But I think it needs to be looked at with a fresh set of eyes.
You've kind of talked about where you think it should go. Do you have anything you want to add real quick?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's other solutions. I mean, even some of the ideas I've heard from on the list that was where to put Public Works. They want to put them even on locations that there should be a business located, not this garage. There's so many alternative locations in this town that we're not looking at right now. We have 35% of it is open space in our town land. We have locations in this town that we're not thinking of. Somebody like me who's a designer, I've seen so much of this town and looked it over, that I'm proposing 3 other options, even beyond the transfer station, that would be even more suggestive. So there is other alternatives that they're not even suggesting.
I think one of the things that Andy talked about, and Jay, you've all talked about the impact on neighborhoods. And if there's anything I've learned in covering news, no matter where you choose, there's a neighborhood there that's going to have a say. And I think that's long-term, obviously something that would need to come up. Final question. You're each going to get a few moments to be in that office. And the third question was for Jacey, so the 6th question is for you as well. You are in the first selectman's office. It's day 1 of your administration. What are your top 3 priorities?
Decorating the office first.
And you have 2,
Okay.
yeah.
Decorate the office first.
There you go.
Everything that was in the previous administration moved out. Day 1 would be, first, we're sending a letter to every single department and employee that we are going to be transparent. Be transparent. I want you to know and let the town know everything we are doing. I want it to be very well publicized, media, and it would be the first thing I do is write a letter to everyone, first of all, to welcome to independence. The first independent woman is now in town hall. The letter telling everyone to be transparent. Then look for the accountability. Review what we're doing in our town. Every budget, I want to look at every department. I'm going to have meetings with everybody, and I want to see what we are doing. I've been going to every meeting for a year. I have a pretty good idea on a lot of things I want to suggest, and a lot of things that are working great, actually. We do have a great team in this town. The 3 things I want to look upon is, first upon getting investors in this town to start looking upon not only my vision and plan that I've proposed. I want you all involved. I want you to start sharing all these images and drawings in this 40-page book that I've been working very hard on. I want you to be part of this. I want you to see this, feel it. I've been going to economic development. I've been showing people what I would love to do. I showed the Board of Selectmen a lot of my ideas. And a lot of people said, we had legs to grow. We have total potential. I'm new and fresh and bringing down these ideas.
It's a busy first day.
It's going to be a busy day. After decorating, it goes quick.
Jamie, your top 3 priorities on day 1.
Day 1 is to begin to rebuild our reputation as a business-friendly community. To begin the process in forming the Standing Building Commission. I think we expressed how important that is to move these projects for their seniors, for the public works, and for their schools forward, rather than having them continue to stall. And the third thing is to begin to give the people a government they can trust again.
Andy, your top 3 priorities.
First thing I would do is call a department head meeting and be informed of what is on their front burner for issues, so that I have the best real-time information. And later on after lunch, I would get around to going around and meeting the rest of the employees for the town. All the while, I'd be keeping the door open because I'm an open door sort of guy. Second thing I would do is call our state delegation, call Representative Lonnie Reed and Pat Widlitz and Senator Ed Meyer, and have them set up making introductions with two departments specifically, the Department of Transportation and the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, DEEP, because DOT right now holds the keys to the development at Exit 53, and I do disagree with Mr. Cosgrove that is years away from happening. No, we're finishing the train bridge 6 or 7 months early, and we're not going to waste that advantage that we have to hit the ground running. And the third call I would make is to a number of developers, substantial parcel owners, many of whom I've already spoken with, and suggest to them that we should bring in your maps. We should start talking, because we do in fact need to get economic development going in this town. And based on the information we received from the department heads on where they're at with their land use, specifically land use policies, and with the assistance of our Hartford delegation, I think that we'd be able to negotiate with these property owners immediately.
You have 30 seconds, but I'm going to do it differently because this will be our final topic here. Give you a minute.
Okay.
2 years have passed. You have been first selectman for 2 years. So you'll each get this question as well. How do you know you've done a good job at the end of those 2 years?
2 years. I also want to jump in there. I've contacted Lonnie, and I also tried Ed Meyer back in the summer about making sure we create those relationships and making things happen in Branford if I win. Well, first of all, after 2 years, it's going to be great to see the seniors so happy that they have a building built, that we have a golf course that we're playing golf on. We're taking solutions to a lot of these problems, and they shouldn't be our problems. There's so many other things that we can have as problems. Building buildings should not be an issue in a town. New York City doesn't have an issue about building buildings. We're not New York City. But the point is, an issue on building buildings should be the lowest of our issues. We need to see in 2 years that all of us are getting along. It's not Republicans against Democrats. This independent woman that's here is part of the system. Bringing in a different, new life to the town. Creating credible drawings. I have the background in drawings and the background of being able to create great images and ideas for our town. Sharing them. And being able to say in 2 years, I'm ready for re-election.
Jamie, end of 2 years, how do you know you did the job that you wanted to do?
We begin to see development in town that's going to provide us with some tax relief. We begin to see our public building needs being met, and the bitterness and the pettiness that's been occurring at all these town meetings is removed. Mm-hmm. Then I'll say a successful 2 years.
And Andy?
2 years from now, we'll be successful if we will have replaced the senior center. 2 years from now, we should be in far better economic straits than we are right now, and I think the Branford's poised to be to really get going in economic development. So we should be able to accomplish that in 2 years. And also, 2 years from now, the town should have a plan and a policy for pre-K, for early childhood education, that should be a public-private partnership so that the entire cost is not put on the backs of the taxpayers. We should be able to figure this out for an optimal result, as well as being fair with the taxpayers of the town.
All right. We have talked about a lot of things. We have found that they're all intertwined. Now you have 2 minutes of a closing statement to tie it all together for us. Again, before we began, we drew the order of this, and we begin with Andy Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and thank you to the Chamber, to Ed, wherever he went to. Appreciate it. Fine job done, and necessary for our form of democracy here. And also, I'd like to thank my wife and my family for being so supportive throughout the campaign and throughout my years of public service. I have been honored and privileged to serve the people of the town of Branford for almost 2 decades now. Folks, in this election, there is a clear choice in leadership and experience and the ability to take Branford into its very bright future. I have served this town in many capacities. I've served several terms in the RTM. I've chaired the Elderly Tax Relief Committee a few times. I've written many ordinances, and I've served as town council before for tax matters. I was first appointed by Don Bonacore back in 1995 when my opponents were still in college. In fact, I've been appointed by 2 Republican administrations as well as 2 Democratic administrations to serve this town, and I'm pleased to have earned their trust. In my law practice on Main Street, I've been a small business owner for 17 years, and I've served families and children and seniors and small businesses, and I'm proud to have earned their trust as well. In this campaign, I've suggested many ideas to enhance our quality of life here in Branford and address the issues that confront us, including economic development and keeping our taxes low and giving our kids educational success, and environmental concerns such as protecting our shoreline from rising sea levels. I promise you that if I'm elected, that I will bring the most enthusiasm and energy and diligence to the job. And I have to point this out. In this election, every vote is very important. And so I urge you to vote, and I'm asking for your support. I do believe that together we can build an even better Branford, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Jacey, your second.
Thank you, Chris. I first want to thank everybody in Branford. You're really important to me. I also want to say a special thanks to my family and friends who have helped me along this journey. I'm refreshing, progressive, enthusiastic, hardworking voice for the public. I'm the independent candidate for our future. I will be the CEO, the Chief Executive Officer, and the spokesperson for the citizens of Branford. I'm the right choice. I'm an independent woman. I know there are many challenges in running a town. I'll bring transparency, accountability, provide solutions to issues, and work hard every day with everyone. Because that is what a leader should do, and that is what I can do. And that's why I should be your first selectwoman here in Branford. I've been a Branford resident for over 42 years. 18 of those years, I've been a professional technical and a business experience and had a business here in town. I have an architectural background that will allow me to prepare and present research and also be able to utilize those skills in conferences, meetings, that'll focus us on economic development and share those ideas with you clearly. I'm also an experienced negotiator for contracts as a business leader. I understand the budget process and to look at the bottom line and make hard choices to make this town profitable and save the taxpayers money. Economic development, tourism, preservation, youth employment, and education will be my major focuses during my administration. I can also deliver on environmental and infrastructure projects which will help and make Branford the state's most livable shoreline town. Reducing our taxes, improving our beaches and waterfronts, a bus service to help us on our daily needs, developing our parks and open space, preserving our town, making senior citizens' needs a priority, build a senior center, a housing, and improve town services. I will continue to focus on these issues that matter to most of us and provide solutions by working together again to solve them. I will also move forward with unity on the number of significant economic development and tourism project ideas and plans that I proposed, such as Branford Village, Branford Fairgrounds, Branford University, Indian Dunes Golf Course, and again, development from 53 to 56. Branford is
Jacey,
ready for a third-party individual
that's your 2
independent.
minutes. Thank you.
And I thank you very much.
May have been a generous 2 minutes, in fact.
Thank you.
It's like when I tell my kids to go to bed. All right, Jamie.
Vote independent.
You have 2 minutes.
All right, yeah, thank you. First, I'd like to thank the Chamber for hosting this debate, and Chris for being the moderator. Most of all, I'd like to thank all those who attended tonight and all those watching on BCTV. So thank you. This weekend, when I was walked the Columbus Day Parade, I got a sense that the people in Branford were ready for a change. I think the voters have a clear choice in November. If you think the town is run properly, then stay the course. But if you think it's time for a change, then I would ask you to support me and my team. I've put together a group of candidates, some Republican, some Democrats, some independent. But I didn't ask anyone to change their affiliation, because for me, it's not about the party, it's about Branford. I'm running for 2 reasons. First, I want an economic development plan that will grow our business taxes, and that starts with Costco. Second, I want people to trust their government again, and that starts with stopping all the fighting and starting to get down to the business that we ought to be taking care of. To do those 2 things will take a leader that is trustworthy and ready. I am not a career politician. I didn't go to school to learn public policy. I just care about fixing problems here in Branford. I was born and raised here. My family business is here. My daughters go to school here. I know Branford. That's why I oppose Tabor. And that's why I want to be your first selectman. My plan for Branford is simple. We create new business revenues, and we use those revenues to fix what's broken. We need to replace Walsh. We need a new senior center, and we need to select the right place to site a new public works building. And we need to make those decisions out in the open, not behind closed doors. If you vote for me, I will continue to be the person that you've come to know. I will listen to everyone's opinion with respect. I will learn as much as I can about the problems we face, and I will lead us together to solutions. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me. On November 5th, please vote the entire Cosgrove for Branford team. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy, Jacey, Jamie. Thank you to the Brentford Chamber of Commerce and to AT&T. And thank you to the audience. You were so well behaved, and I do appreciate it. We all do. The candidates certainly do. They all had a chance to answer the questions, get their points out there, and we appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. Election Day is November 5th. Thank you again.
Vote independent. Thank you.